Quarterbacks, who are people putting in their lineups?
Well, I'm going to go with Cam Newton this week, who is the Star Wars. What is it? The three sequels or whatever, like episodes 7 through 9. Like, he's the Force Awakens, because like everybody, no matter what he does, it's never good enough. Everybody just wants to go to the internet and complain, and they didn't like his game last week. Listen, he gave up a passing touchdown to Jacoby Meyer, although with the amount of rushing touchdowns he steals, I think we're fine in calling it a wash. But he's been pretty good. Like he was good. Like you didn't get, 20 fantasy points, but he was still good. And I think this week against the Houston Texans, who've allowed the most rushing yards per game this season, this is going to be a pretty good opportunity for Cam Newton. Another quarterback that I like is Alex Smith. He's had at least 325 passing yards in back-to-back weeks. He set a career high with 390 yards. The only thing that I didn't like, although I do have Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick, so I wasn't too bummed out, he didn't throw a touchdown. Like, if you could mix in a touchdown, which he probably could, this week the Cincinnati Bengals have allowed a top 7 fantasy quarterback in 3 of the last 4 games and have allowed 2 touchdown passes in 6 straight. So if this is the week that Alex Smith can go 325 and 2, I think you got to make that move. Get him into your lineup. He's a good quarterback.
He is a good quarterback, and he looks healthy, and give him credit for being fearless, because I know after that kind of injury, a lot of folks would have just, hung it up and called it quits. But he's back, and he's playing well. Running back, I guess we're keeping the Washington theme going, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of weird of how much trust we're putting into the Washington FT, but we love the matchup. But I'm going to go with Antonio Gibson this week. He crushed it once again. He scored 22.5 fantasy points against the Lions, was the RB7. But he's super consistent. He's had at least 12 fantasy points in 6 of his last 8 games, 4 rushing touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 combined. He's also starting to see some targets out of the backfield. He's had at least 4 in 4 out of his last 6. And again, they're playing the Bengals. They've allowed a lot of rushing yards, not necessarily rushing touchdowns, which is fine. But it's starting to figure out, like, we can trust not only Antonio Gibson, but I really do believe that J.D. McKissick is a nice option as well. Like, listen, Shanahan's it might have been fully eradicated in Washington. So get both of those guys into your lineups. I love Nyheim Hines this week. It's never going to be easy to figure out which Colts running back is going to get the call. And even if you look on last week's snaps, where Hines had kind of double, he had 56% of the snaps. But this week, he's going up against the Packers, who've allowed 2 receiving touchdowns to running backs in 2 of the last 4 weeks. Running backs have 20 receptions against them over the last month. They've also given up the 4th most receiving yards to running backs during that stretch. I'm expecting this game to be a little bit more high scoring, given even with the Colts defense, but figure that Hines is going to be targeted a lot in this game.
I just like that of the 3 running backs, Hines seems to have the most consistent role. I still haven't figured out how they're using Wilkins versus Taylor, but Hines, his production and his opportunity seems to stay steady week to week. So I appreciate that. Wide receiver, who are you looking at?
I think Marquis Hollywood Brown is the personification of the do something meme. Like, come on, like we keep waiting, like, do something. But I think this is a pretty good opportunity for him. He's had some games this season where he's been pretty good. And I think that this week against the Titans, who've allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers this season, this is it. They've allowed the 2nd most receptions per game to wide receivers. And they've allowed a top 20 fantasy receiver in 7 of their last 8 games. And I know that Willie Snead was out there. I know he was a desperation play for you last week, but I think this is going to be Hollywood Brown's week, so I'm going to get him into my lineup. And I'm also going to be starting CeeDee Lamb. We talked about earlier in the show that Andy Dalton is expected to return to be the starting quarterback for the Cowboys this season. He was the most targeted receiver when Andy Dalton was the quarterback. And now you're looking at this Vikings team, who've allowed the 5th most fantasy points per games to wide receiver. They've allowed close to 2 touchdown receptions per game to wide receivers. It should have been more. I blame that on Nick Foles in the offense, and I don't believe that Andy Dalton's going to miss the throws that Nick Foles was missing last week. So I think I'm really confident in CeeDee Lamb this week. So we like him, so start him.
It's nice to have CeeDee Lamb back in our lives, and I'm on my last. I'm on my last nerves with Marquise Brown. Like it has to happen this week, otherwise I'm backing away. I'm done.
We're
Just
good.
frustrated.
It'll
That's all.
happen.
I'm just frustrated. All right, tight ends. Who are tight ends we're starting?
Well, I'm going to go with Hayden Hurst, although this one's a little bit tricky because even though he's been very consistent over the last couple of weeks, there is the looming specter of Calvin Ridley coming back, and that might be something that impacts him. We'll certainly keep an eye on that. We'll update you on the all-new NFL Fantasy app. Look for the player stories. I'll be talking about him over the weekend when we have a better idea. But you know what? Hurst has scored double-digit points in 4 consecutive games. He led the Falcons in targets against the Broncos 2 weeks ago. And I really do believe that he's got a decent enough share of this offense that you can start him even if Calvin Ridley returns. And you know what? The Saints have allowed 6 touchdown receptions to tight ends this season. So I feel like if it's not a heavy reception volume game, that he can go out there and get into the end zone this week as somebody scoring a touchdown, not just, walking through it on his way to the end zone. And then Eric Ebron is also another tight end that I'm looking at. It's so tough. I mean, we got Travis Kelce and then that's it. Like that, we have nobody else that we can trust. When I'm in a situation like this, I look for somebody in an offense that you expect to throw the ball a little bit. It's tough because the trio of Steelers receivers have been so good, but the volume I expect to be key in this one. So Eric Ebron is a flex option for me. I'm not starting him over. Don't tweet me and be like, bro, I said Kelce this week because you said Ebron. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying streamable guy.
Yeah, I've been on the stream Eric Ebron train because I feel like at this point, if you're streaming a tight end, you just want him to catch a touchdown and then you'll feel okay. So I'm sort of banking on that opportunity. Speaking of streaming, defenses that folks might want to stream this week.
I'm going to go with the LA Chargers. Now, I understand that Joe Flacco is coming off the best game of his season. And I know that's weird to say. You didn't expect to say that in 2020. It's like, hey, Nicolas Cage is a shoo-in for the Oscars in 2021. You might think like, hey, Rank, that's not fair. Because Nick has won an Oscar, but Joe Flacco has won a Super Bowl MVP award. So are they basically the same person? With apologies to Patrick Claybon for stealing his gag. But he's not here. So I like them this week. I also like the Minnesota Vikings. I hate to admit this as a Bears fan, but I was recommending the Vikings to people last week heading into the Monday night game. And it's not something that I would have done because, listen, I'm a fan. But my head told me it was the right thing to do. And if you did do that last week, you might as well hold on to them against the Cowboys. I mean, obviously, the Cowboys are better with Andy Dalton, and they're not going to be the pushover that they've been with Double G or the Nooch. But I still think that they're a pretty good option this week, even though CeeDee Lamb's going to score 2 touchdowns against them.
I do have some breaking news here.
Oh, no.
Justin Herbert has cut his hair. He's got some sort of weird buzz cut now. It looks like someone's mom put a bowl on his head and sort of cut around. It's not a good look. It's short. I feel like now you might have to go back. I don't know where you had him and start him, sit him this week, but I feel like you might want to go and take a look. You might want to revise now.
He's like Samson. Haircut. The strength is in his hair.
It is not good, and I feel like if I'm Anthony Lynn, I'm very concerned about what my team's fortunes are going to be this week with Justin Herbert having cut his hair. Who knows?
By the way, anyway. Is it weird that I know? Oh, I'm sorry, you've got a sponsor.
Go ahead. I'll do that, and then we can come back. That was Secure Starts, presented by Visa. All right, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry, but that whole thing about Samson, I don't know. Is that a Bible thing or whatever?
It is.
I know it from Boys in the Hood. I don't know its original source, but I just know that the one of the villains in Boys in the Hood says that, and that's how I know that quote. Is that weird?
Samson,
should I know?
Samson and the Fox Hills Mall, things that Boys in the Hood has taught you about.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do some sits real quick as we talk start sits here. Who are quarterbacks that you are avoiding this week?
Well, I'm going to say Tom Brady. And we took a chance on Tom last week, which I know is weird to say because he's the GOAT, but he's a streamable quarterback. Like he's a week-to-week guy. You don't put him into the lineup every week. Like it's like, like we see this in Hollywood all the time. Like I understand you were a star years ago, but you're no longer on the A-list. You know what I'm saying? Like Ben Savage, like you might've been great in Boy Meets World, but you're no longer on the A-list. I mean, Danielle Fishel is, she's awesome. You used to see her at like PWG shows. Like she's a huge wrestling fan. Like her husband's a huge wrestling fan. In any event, I'm not starting Brady this week because that Rams defense is ridiculous. They've allowed the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. They're fresh off a game where they harangued Russell Wilson. Almost cost me the dub in my second season. You know what? Actually, they didn't. I ended up beating Steve. So good for me. Anyways, the other quarterback in that game, Jared Goff, he's going to be the one guy who doesn't take advantage of the Seahawks. I mean, what are you doing? Like, how are you not at least getting one touchdown? Like, you've got to be, I don't know. It's like there used to be this Miss Pac-Man game in the arcade by our house, and it always had free credits. And then I was the guy who was playing it when the owner discovered that the game had free credits, and I got in trouble for it. So I know what Jared Goff is going through. Like, it's off. Like, I'm the one who doesn't get free credits on Miss Pac-Man. And by the way, I have a problem because in our NFL Fantasy Live League, I have two quarterbacks that I've been rotating. It's Goff and Brady. I should have thought ahead to this. And now I'm going to have to start Ben Roethlisberger if he's available.
I think I might.
If he's available, he might be gone.
We might be able to work out a deal because I have Joe Burrow on my bench, so maybe we can negotiate something here to help you out. Running backs though, which ones are you sitting this week?
Todd Gurley, I believe, is the first one. I don't have my new monitor hooked up, so my notes have now run out. But I don't like Todd Gurley this week, I don't believe. Is that who I'm saying? That's Todd Gurley. The Saints have allowed the second fewest fantasy points to running backs over the past month. The team who has allowed the fewest, it's the Atlanta Falcons. So we're not starting Alvin Kamara either. No, I'm kidding. Joking. But I don't really feel great about Todd Gurley. He's been touchdown dependent. And the Saints haven't allowed a running back to get into the end zone over the last month. They've allowed just 3 rushing touchdowns on the season. So Todd Gurley, I love him. I think he's been playing great, but this is a week that I would try to avoid him. And Ronald Jones, I can't start him this week. Again, this is a tough matchup against the Rams. They've allowed the 4th fewest points to running backs this season. If you have any other options on your roster, I think you're going to have to look at them. This is going to be a low-scoring game. I think this is going to be ugly. Kind of like the Super Bowl that Tom Brady played against the Rams a couple of years ago. I do believe the Rams will be victorious. By the way, I still get confused. I don't know why I still think of the number 27 being associated with Leonard Fournette. And I feel like Rojo should be wearing 25 like he did in college. But that's just me.
No one has gotten. Some people think it's Leonard Fournette. I've heard a lot of people make LeGarrette Blount references. This number change. This number change has not worked out for Rojo at all. He might have to reconsider that in the offseason. Wide receivers. You got another buck on the list for this one.
Yeah, I took it really easy on myself this week, and I went with Antonio Brown. And this week, I'm anticipating him being blanketed by Jalen Ramsey. This was one of the best wide receiver cornerback rivalries a couple of years ago when they were playing for the Steelers and Jacksonville Jaguars respectively. And I really do believe that Ramsey needs to start to get into the conversation about being the defensive player of the year. His biggest competition might even be on his own team. But you look at the receivers that he's been shutting down this season, most recently DK Metcalf on Sunday. I really don't want any part of this. I think that this is an opportunity to leave Antonio Brown on the bench. And I'm going to take the easy way out again. And I'm going to say that AJ Green is a sit for me because, I'm a coward. It's so hard to put together sit-em wide receivers. But I really do believe with AJ Green, even with the Bengals throwing at a prolific pace, he's been usurped by Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins especially. And Green, he's not a mentor. He's not the mentor of this team. But he's also like the elder statesman, like when Ric Flair was running the things for Evolution. You know what I'm saying? You knew it was going to be Batista and Randy Orton who were going to be doing all the good stuff. But I can't really trust AJ Green anymore. Maybe this is a game where they blanket those two guys and AJ Green steps up because of the matchup. But I can't trust that. And I think that he's almost droppable at this point because he's just moved that far down the pecking order of Bengals receivers.
Yeah, Joe Burrow has been able to support a pair of top 25 wide receivers, but AJ Green is definitely not one of them. Tight ends to avoid. Who you got?
Jonnu Smith continues to concern me. He did get a rushing touchdown last week, but if it wasn't for that touchdown, that would have been a horrific game from him. And I guess you can say that about every player. Like, hey, if Dalvin Cook didn't score 4 touchdowns, that would have been a terrible game. Like, I understand what you're saying, but they really bailed him out points wise with that scamper. They're just not targeting him enough. And I think it goes back to Ryan Tannehill. He's just not throwing the ball like he once was. And it's kind of hurting a lot of guys. Corey Davis is somebody that I probably wouldn't be starting this week. Jonnu Smith is another one. This is why I'm desperate to try to get rid of him in my league of record, try to find somebody who can come in and take that production. So Jonnu, if there's other guys, I would rather have Eric Ebron off the waiver wire than Jonnu at the moment. And another player is Robert Tonyan. And, it's unfortunate because high volume passing offense hasn't really meant a lot for him outside of the couple weeks when Devontae Adams was out. But as long as Devontae Adams is playing football, and as long as MVS is there, now starting to get into the mix as well, Aaron Jones, I figure, is starting to get more starting to get healthier, I guess I should say, and starting to also, like, Aaron Rodgers loves throwing to Aaron Jones when he gets to the end zone. So Tonyan is going to have to be somebody that I'm leaving on the bench.
That one Robert Tonyan week was fun. Too bad we didn't all get to take advantage of it. That was a good time.
It was great.
Any defenses that folks should avoid this week?
You know what? When we started this week off, I thought the Broncos would be a team to sit, but I actually like them now because the Dolphins will be going from the warm of Miami to the cold of Colorado. So the only defense I would say that you sit this week is the New England Patriots. And I only say that because people might still be holding on to them. Because anytime somebody has that connection with a team that helped them out the previous season, it's hard to let that go. And the Patriots have been so good defensively over the last couple of years that you want to continue to start them. But even this week, I just don't think that there's enough of an opportunity. Now, obviously, the Texans' offensive line has been an issue, but the Patriots have reached double-digit sacks just twice this season. So I really don't think they're getting to the quarterback enough. They need to force more turnovers, which they're not doing. So I'm going to have to leave them on the bench.
That muscle memory. Everybody's like, hey, the Patriots defense, they're good, but they're not so good this year. It is a completely different defense than what we saw last year.